So lately I've been noticing the reemergence of a very old GOP playbook that harkens back to President Richard Nixon's infamous Southern strategy. During his campaign for president in 1968, the Republican Party made a concerted effort to reach white Southerners who used to vote for Democrats by playing to their fears of African Americans and the civil rights movement. And it worked. By pitting one group of Americans against another, the GOP successfully managed to split off Southern whites from the Democratic Party. Now, decades later, the right wing is reviving that same playbook, this time with Muslim Americans and trans people. Hear me out here. The GOP is trying to recruit Muslim Americans, a community that makes up less than 2% of the U.S. population.
Yes, welcome back. I recently came across this. Jen Psaki is going viral. According to this article, Jen Psaki claims Muslims who oppose LGBTQ indoctrination in schools are being recruited to hate trans people. I don't know how true is this. Going down on the article, in a Sunday segment on MSNBC, former White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki speculated that the reason Muslim Americans have been opposing LGBT materials in schools with children is because the Republican Party is pitting Muslim Americans and trans people against each other. Psaki compared the divide that has taken place in the Muslim communities and gender indoctrination in schools to the Southern strategy from Richard Nixon. The strategy, Psaki claimed, was a gulf effort to get white Southerners to vote Republican instead of Democrat.
Hear me out here. The GOP is trying to recruit Muslim Americans, a community that makes up less than 2% of the U.S. population, against another tiny marginalized group of Americans, transgender people. It's important to remember that back in 2011, during the Republican primary, the right wing had designated Muslim Americans as public enemy number one. No surprise, given that conspiracy theorists, remember the birthers? I do, had been trying for years to portray President Obama as a Trojan horse for Sharia law. Republican after Republican candidate ginned up fear about the fabricated threat posed by an Islamic legal doctrine debated by scholars for centuries. To them, the imaginary prospect of Sharia law in this country was scarier than gun violence, climate change, and more important to discuss than, say, millions of people who didn't have health care.
I do not believe in Sharia law in American courts. I believe in American laws in American courts.
If we think that there is an undermining now, just wait. If Sharia is adopted or utilized by justices in the United States.
Accepting Sharia in the United States would be the end of our civilization as we know it. No jurisdiction will tolerate having Sharia imposed in the United States of America.
The end of our civilization as we know it, he says. Of course, there was no chance Sharia law was going to be implemented in the United States. Now, Trump's origin story is the birther movement is a part of that. But all of this also set the stage for him to make this declaration as a candidate in 2015.
Donald J. Trump is calling for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States.
Now fast forward 8 years, and the right wing has focused their fear-mongering on trans people. And who better to go after the new enemy than the old enemy? Consider this from 2015.
This is ridiculous. Hearing this from Jen Psaki, we understand what she has been spewed in the past. Coming out to voice this, say Republicans are recruiting or, pitting these people to go against trans people is something I have never seen. So, I don't know what exactly she's struggling to portray on this video, because Muslims standing up for their right, especially with this kind of books in school, has been a thing. I notice they have been advocating against some of these books in school. So Jen Psaki is standing up here to say they are doing this and doing that because of And even going further to compare this to Nixon, it is outrageous to actually see the kind of comparison she's bringing in here. We know Jen Psaki. I know what she has been spewing in the past. We all saw what she did when she was still the White House press secretary. Not a single day she was able to tell the truth. So now coming out to say this kind of lies is something I'm not even wondering, because if she could do that when she was working at the White House, it is possible she can still do the same thing now. It is crazy. Like, everybody feels the pains inside. If you allow your children to pick up some of these doctrines in school, it is your problem. Don't attribute that, oh, Republicans want to do this, want to do that.
Be the warehouse of all these, Muslim people coming from these far-flung lands where, we're just not going to be able to control who becomes radicalized, who doesn't, because of technology. It's impossible.
Now, if you can believe it, Laura Ingraham is rallying Muslims against books in schools with LGBTQ plus themes.
Us Catholics and other Christians, other people of faith have been waiting for the Muslims to step up on this issue.
In an interview later with Semaphore, Laura Ingraham's guest, who you just saw on the screen, couldn't believe how ironic this all is. He said, quote, 5 years ago, Laura was saying we shouldn't have Muslims in this country. Now she's saying, thank God the Muslims are here. Just to summarize, the right-wingers, the conspiracy theorists, the birthers, they now want us to forget the years they spent fear-mongering about Muslims and Islam. 10 years ago, standing against Sharia law was the key GOP litmus test. Now that litmus test seems to be how fervently you oppose transgender people. Just listen to what Trump himself had to say about that. Even he doesn't exactly know why he's attacking them.
It's amazing how strongly people feel about that. You see, I'm talking about cutting taxes. People go like that. Talk about transgender. Everyone goes crazy. Who would have thought 5 years ago you didn't know what the hell it was?
So what you just heard in that video, that sounds an awful lot like and reminiscent of what George Wallace, a staunch segregationist, once told a newspaper editor. Quote, I tried to talk about good roads and good schools and all of these things that have been part of my career, and nobody listened. And then I began talking about black people and they stomped the floor. So let's be clear. This is the same old GOP playbook. Another cynical ploy to tear at the fabric of our society and damage the idea that out of many, we are one. All because they want so desperately to regain the White House.
Sometime when I see a segment like this, and should I say it on this video? No, I cannot say it. She went back to compare what Trump did, by putting a ban and comparing it to what is happening now. I don't know if these people don't get this point. Nobody is after trans people. Nobody is doing that. What I see on a daily basis is instead the inverse of what she is saying. They are after to pass their doctrine to children, and parents don't like that. So when they speak up against that, it is a problem to some of these people.